In 1999, Fethullah Gulen came to the U.S. for medical treatment. In his absence from Turkey, he was accused by a special government prosecutor of leading an Islamist network intent on undermining the secular Turkish government.
The establishment felt threatened by this rise of sort of a middle-class bourgeois movement, and that it had this religious leader, used Sufi ideas about tolerance and about education, about sharing, and about everybody having part of the economic pie. And so I think that was the greatest challenge to the establishment. And so what they did is they used their anti-terror law and charged him as a terrorist, basically.
When you have the kind of ideology that the military particularly had, and some of the really hardline secular elites, they did not trust anyone, and therefore anyone who was associated with a public organization that was, yes, Muslim and Islamically oriented, but not an Islamic political movement, that really didn't matter. And so I think there were concerns about ultimately his security.
In poor health, Fethullah Gulen remained in self-imposed exile at a retreat in Pennsylvania while awaiting the outcome of his trial. The movement was already in the United States, establishing interfaith dialogue and cultural institutions. Eventually, a group of Turkish educators influenced by Gulen's ideas began opening charter schools.
All of our schools are located in urban environments. So we serve predominantly minority students and predominantly students who are coming from economically disadvantaged families. So when you work with the student population, motivation is very important.
I'm the college counselor, and also I'm teaching the advanced math classes. We know if you have the better score on ACT, you can get the scholarship. I am willing to help them during the summertime. At least 2 or 3 days I will be in my office. I will provide the practice tests.
I had the lowest self-esteem before coming over to Horizon. It's so hard for me to learn something and to memorize it. Other schools will be like, oh, well, if you fail this class, you fail it. These teachers actually search for us and say, I want you to pass this class. And they spend as much time as you need them to explaining what you don't get, and they don't complain.
And there's definitely days when I go home and I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? But then there's also times when you see the relationships you've built with kids and you see the relationships that you've built with your school and your community, where it's all worth it.
People don't go into these schools to make money, right? They go in because they're dedicated. The reason I have great respect for the schools is because they really go into poor areas and work with kids that if they were in the public school system wouldn't be getting anywhere.
Charter schools, like all public schools, are prohibited from teaching religion. However, these charter schools attract scrutiny because of their perceived association with an influential Muslim leader.
The only connection to Fethullah Gulen is some of the Turkish-American educators who founded these schools, who are involved in these schools. At a personal level, they were inspired by Fethullah Gulen and his ideas about, serving communities, serving people, regardless of their backgrounds.
Do we agree or disagree with 3?
Although most of the teachers in the U.S. charter schools are American, critics point out that taxpayers are paying for the visas of international teachers and have expressed fears of insidious exposure to Islam.
I think that people in the movement are concerned because they realize that even though the movement is not somehow a, quote, Islamic political movement, that's the way in which people in Turkey have tried to cast them, that is the hardline secularist, and it gets picked up in this country among those who are just simply, we have a strong minority of people who are anti-Islam and anti-Muslim. And so for them, if you say this is a Muslim movement, immediately there will be all of these suspicions about, well, what are they doing?
They've also come at a time when The United States and the Western culture is in a convulsion about Islam. And there are people, huge chunks of people, who've already made up their mind that Islam is a deadly religion and that people in it are deadly, are up to trickery, and cannot be trusted. And there are certain members in that viewpoint who will never be converted to another viewpoint, no matter what anybody does.